Good morning, RJ here with Engine Accessories, and this morning we're gonna run through the truck, how to operate, and a few maintenance tips. As soon as you pull up to the job site, one of the main things you wanna make sure you do is engage your park brake lever inside the cab. Now that's gonna give us power. As soon as you engage the park brake switch, it's gonna activate the low air cylinder, which is now gonna pass power through the switches so you can activate the switches. No park brake, no power, no switches. So make sure the park brake is engaged properly before you start. If there's an air leak in the truck, it's definitely gonna be a factor in producing air that's also gonna hurt the switches to come on. So we gotta make sure we got good air pressure on the gauge. 90 psi is what we need to make this low air cylinder pop off. So as soon as you got the truck on, park brake engaged, we're gonna come back here. You're gonna hit first always your vacuum switch, give it a couple of seconds, and then engage your rev up switch. We do not want you to turn on the rev up and then the vacuum switch. We don't want all that initial torque going to the PTO and the coupling set so it won't get damaged. So remember, 1 and then 2. You won't have power on 2 unless 1 is activated. So just turning it off is not gonna be a big deal. Turning it on is very important. That's how we're gonna operate the vacuum system. Then you're gonna come back, engage into vacuum or pressure, whatever it is you're gonna be working with at that job site. Most of the time it's gonna be in vacuum. So vacuum, perfect vacuum, we want you to be around 20 to 22, 24 inches of vacuum reading to the left. That's gonna be great vacuum. If for some reason your gauge is not working properly and you're not sure if you're producing good vacuum, in vacuum mode, you're gonna get good, nice exhaust out of here. So that's gonna be a good indication of you having good vacuum on your pump. This vacuum relief valve is only gonna be activated when you're in vacuum mode. When it tops off somewhere between 20, 22 or 24 inches of vacuum, you're gonna start getting a little hissing sound here where it's pulling in cool air to help cool down the pump. Even though the pump has a big fan in the back cooling it down, this is also gonna help to cool down the pump inside. One big deal, guys, when you're using a vacuum pump is make sure you're engaged all the way into vacuum or pressure. You can see there's a stopper inside the diverter valve that you can actually hear it and feel it with your hand. Make sure if you're in vacuum mode, you're fully engaged, or if you're in pressure mode, you're fully engaged. Don't come and just throw the handle and you're thinking that it's fully engaged. All that is gonna do is damage the check valve inside the diverter valve. Not fully engaged, it's just gonna circulate hot air within itself and beat up the spring and the check valve inside the diverter valve. So make sure you're fully engaged all the way. Another big one is, so we don't leave any load on the pump and put any strain on the check valve, make sure you turn off the system and then come back and put it into neutral. All of liquid environmental trucks are equipped with a sea level gauge. So as soon as you turn on the truck, ignition power that's feeding the sea level gauge. So as soon as you turn it on, you're always gonna have an initial reading. That is your 0. So when you go to a customer's location and you wanna show them what you pulled out of there, to see what you had on there, what reading you had on the display, and then just minus that on whatever you pulled from their tank. That's gonna be your 0. The initial reading is gonna be always your 0. And then back here, you got your 4-inch inlet, your 6-inch discharge. You should be able to operate this easily without any kind of beating on the handle with a piece of wood or a pipe or anything like that. Just make sure after you're suctioning, give it a couple, another minute or two to make sure you clean out all the lines and you clean out your intake pipe. That extra minute or 2 is gonna be good to the intake valve. We don't want any buildup. When you go to close it, if there's any buildup in there, you're just gonna be beating down on the 2 discs and now you're gonna be leaking. If you get stopped by DOT and you have leaking valves, the driver gets the ticket, not the company. So please take care of the valve and operate it correctly. Same thing with the discharge valve. After you clean out, just hose it down with your jetter or your wash down system, just so you don't have any buildup in that little channel here and you're not beating down trying to close the valve incorrectly. Again, the driver gets the ticket, not the company. If you have leaking valves, easiest thing to do is just tighten up on these brass nuts, and that'll take care of small leaks until you could remove it and put new packing glands in there. Same thing with the 4-inch intake valve. On your passenger side, you're gonna find your jetter system. Very simple jetter, nothing too crazy on how to operate this system. We do need to focus on the same setup as a vacuum system. Jetter on, give it a couple of seconds, and then rev up switch. After that, same thing with the other one. Rev up won't work unless number 1 is activated, but we don't want all that initial impact going to the system once you hit the switches. So jetter first, rev up second. Always make sure that you have your valve, your high PSI valve open so you can operate the system. Make sure we want it open so we have the system flooded already with water before you activate the jetter system. So make sure the high pressure ball valve is open before you start working the system. We just don't want it cavitating and burning up any seals. One big deal is if you're not gonna be using the system, do not leave it on. There are not run dry seals in the jetter, so at some point they're gonna heat up and cause a leak. So if you're not gonna be on the jetter, turn it off. Make sure if the jetter's on, make sure you're gonna use the gun. I can't tell you if it's a minute, 5 minutes, an hour, but the system is gonna get hot. Even though the plungers are working to return the water to tank, that head is still gonna get hot and damage some seals. So if you're not gonna be using the jetter system, make sure it's off. So on the jetter system here, obviously this is your PSI gauge. We're gonna be somewhere around 2600 PSI. That's gonna be proper performance for this jetter. So we wanna make sure that gauge is always around 2400 PSI. It's not gonna stay there, but once you unload, it's gonna spike and mark it and come back down. So 2400, 2500, 2600 PSI is what we want to be working this system. Double check your strainer every week. Check your strainer in case you're pulling from a dirty water source or a well. Just check your strainer and clean it out every week. This is your oil cap for the system. To the left of that pump on the rear, you can see that black rubber piece with the clear side eye. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see it here on the left side of the pump. That's your side eye for the oil in the pump. We want to make sure that it's always halfway up that side eye. There's a red dot there indicating the level of the oil where it should be at. A couple of big things you guys are going to be responsible for is both drive lines. As you can see, there's Zerk fittings on both ends of these drive lines. You're gonna need to grease that up at least once a month. As this drive line spins, it gets hotter, it's gonna deplete that oil, that grease in there. So you need to grease both ends once a month, both sides. The gearbox is a very critical component in the system as well. You need to keep an eye on this thing. Make sure there's no play here. As you can see, there's no play. We don't want any kind of play in there. Not a 16th of an inch, or an 1/8 of an inch. We don't want any kind of play. We want it this tight in the gearbox to the drive line. You also want to look around the shaft, the seal shaft ends. We don't want any grease dripping here. If you see any kind of wetness, that means the seals are going bad on this thing. So keep an eye on, every once a month when you're greasing the drive line, just look around, make sure there's no oil dripping from the seals on these shafts. In another clip, I'm gonna show you the coupling set on what it should look like. We cover a lot of warranty, manufacturer warranties. Tank, stuff that was mounted incorrectly, we cover that type of stuff. But there's a lot of components that as soon as this truck leaves here, the owner, the driver, the fleet manager is gonna be responsible for. So you're gonna have to get under the truck, check the drive lines every month and grease both ends. The PTO side, where the drive line is connected to the PTO, and on the gearbox side, where the drive line connects to the gearbox to run the vacuum system, and where the drive line connects to the jetter to run the jetter system. So you're gonna be responsible for maintaining and greasing those drive lines every month. This is what a perfect one looks like, nice and square. We don't want any jagged edges, chewed up. This is what a perfect coupling kit should look like. This goes on the gearbox side, and this goes on the vacuum side. You always want to make sure this area doesn't get damaged. We don't want any kind of play in here. We want this really nice and snug on both sides. We want to make sure that you always have both set screws in place with Loctite. We want this is a perfect coupling kit. When you go to install these, you want to butt them up as tight as possible, then you want to back them out just a tad bit. We want about that much of a gap in there, about a nickel or a dime. That way, if you tighten it up, if you put it in and you install it and it's too tight, it could possibly push that shaft into the end cap and damage the pump. So we want a tiny little space in between it, about the thickness of a dime or a nick once installed.
Good morning, my name's Toby. I'm from Fruitland Manufacturing. We are the manufacturer of the vacuum pump that are on most LES trucks. This particular one's an 870. Over the last 5 to 10 years, you guys have been basically buying these exclusively. This is a rotary vane vacuum pump. The most important thing to remember with all vacuum trucks and all vacuum pumps, whether it's a blower, a rotary vane like this, or a liquid ring, is that this pump only pumps air. The only thing that this vacuum pump moves is air. We got to make sure that nothing other than air gets in this pump. How do we do that? We have a primary shutoff at the top where the hose is coming out of. that's got a cage and a ball in it. As this tank fills up or as the vacuum levels rise, that ball will shoot up and shut the vacuum off to this vacuum pump. If that fails, we have our secondary shut off. This has the exact same items in it, filter, ball, cage. If this starts filling with liquid, the ball's gonna come up, stop the vacuum, prevent any product from getting into this vacuum pump. So again, the most important thing to remember is that this pump doesn't move grease, it doesn't move septic, it only moves air. And those are the two items that protect other products from getting into this vacuum pump. Okay, the number one failure or vacuum pumps is product getting into them, okay? Number two failure, vacuum pumps. All rotary vane vacuum pumps use oil. The oil is sacrificial, okay? This pump is gonna go through oil. This reservoir is 1 1/4 US gallons. This will last you 20 hours of actual pump time. So I suggest this pump, that reservoir gets filled every day before you go out. That way you know you're gonna be safe for the day. You're not gonna be running this vacuum pump for 20 hours in a single day, okay? So always make sure that this is full. It needs to be full, the pump needs oil. Second failure, okay? As I said, the oil in this pump is sacrificial. As this pump comes up to temperature, as it gets up to speed, as it gets running, as it gets to higher vacuum levels, okay, it's going to turn that sacrificial oil into smoke, and that smoke is going to come out here in the form of a smoky exhaust. Okay, we'd like to see a nice white exhaust. Means the pump's at the right temperature, everything's running fine. Third failure, running this pump too slow. Now this pump needs to run around 1350 RPM. The guys here at EAM make sure that it's all set up in the cab for you. It's all programmed into the PTO. The ECM of this truck knows that when you engage the PTO, it's gonna bring the idle of this chassis up to run this pump at the right speed. If that system starts failing or something goes wrong, or you have a dead battery and the ECM loses this information, it's critical that this gets back to the shop and gets that reset, because you do not want to run this pump too slow. If you run this pump slow, there's not enough centrifugal force spinning the rotor to force the vanes out and stay on the inside of that housing. So what happens is the vanes slap and they cause washboarding, and the washboarding gets worse and worse as the vanes come around, and they almost use as little ramps, and it just makes it worse, like a snowball going downhill. Okay, so it's critical that it's got oil, we only put air in it, and it's running the right speed. If you do those three things, you're gonna have a long life with this pump. On this system that we sell for you guys, we have the oil catch muffler and the secondary shutoff. On the secondary shutoff, as Raul was saying earlier, we have vacuum relief, pressure relief. Most important thing on this truck, the most important item on this entire truck for you as an operator for safety is this brass valve right here. You do not want to mess with this brass valve, and you always want to make sure it's working. So at whatever pressure the guys at EAM set their unit at, this is going to pop off and allow air out. When this tank has 5 PSI in it, a tank this size, you're dealing with about 170,000 pounds of pressure. So any weldable item on this tank that over time may have gotten weak or compromised has a risk of blowing off and causing injury, and every year someone dies on one of these trucks. So the most important thing on this truck for anyone is this pressure relief valve, and you need to make sure that it's running. As far as maintenance goes, I mean, if anything goes seriously wrong, we probably want you bringing it back to the professionals here at EAM. In the meantime, while you're running it, we'd like to do what's called a diesel flush. The diesel flush contains, the liquid itself contains 3/4 of a part diesel, 1/4 part vacuum pump oil. We have a filter pod here. We take the filter pod lid off of here, and the filter comes out. You'll be looking right down into the vacuum pump, okay? We're gonna go into the vacuum, into the cab. We're gonna turn the vacuum pump on. We're gonna turn it on into vacuum. We're gonna slowly, very, very slowly pour half of that mixture into that filter pod. It'll go into the vacuum pump, flush everything, get everything clean, get all the vanes sliding properly, and all of that product will end up in this muffler. Then we want you to drain the muffler, repeat the process with the other half of the diesel flush liquid, okay? That's the best thing you can do for this vacuum pump, is diesel flush maintenance. That keeps this pump clean, keeps everything lubricated, keeps everything working the way it's supposed to be. Within this pump are 8 vanes. These vanes are made of phenolic resin covered Kevlar, like the bulletproof vest stuff, okay? They spin at 1350 RPM, and as they spin at 1350 RPM, they do wear out, especially if you get a little bit of grime or grit in here. They wear out faster. We have these 2 little bolts here, these 2 red nuts. These are vane wear test rod ports, okay? So you can pop one of these off, It's a two-man operation. You pop one of these off and you get a welding rod, a 1/8 rod, whatever rod you have in the shop. You drop it into that hole, and the other gentleman, your partner is going to be in the back spinning the pump by hand. As you spin the pump by hand, you're going to find that rod drop in. As the rod drops in, whatever the distance it drops in is what the vane is worn. If it's worn to 3/16 of an inch, it's time to call Raul and get a rebuild kit. Okay, if it's at a 1/4 inch, you got to do it right away. So that's the second thing for maintenance, is always make sure that your vanes are wide enough and thick enough to do the job. As you wear the vanes down, you end up having more vane out of the slot than in the slot, and that can cause a rollover. So as far as maintenance goes, it's really not that hard to do. Keeping it clean, making sure the vanes are the right size, keeping oil in it, and you'll have a long life with this vacuum pump. As I said earlier, this pump only moves air, and the last line of protection is the final filter, the filter pod within the vacuum pump itself. You can see the round pod. This is what a clean filter looks like. This needs to be cleaned regularly, okay? If you are doing the diesel flush, which we'd like to see you do at least a couple times a week, especially with the business you're in at LES, we would like to see this cleaned as well, because you're gonna have to take this out to do the diesel flush, okay? So this is what it looks like clean, and this is how it should look. You got to have it allow air through it, or your vacuum pump's not going to perform right, okay? Because all we're doing is pulling air from that tank and making a void in this tank, and that's what we need it to happen at the right time, the right speed, and the only way to do it is to keep this stuff clean.